Are the Bruins the third best team in the Big Ten? Or they can compete for a conference championship and a national championship next year? All that more on Locked On UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. It's your team every day. Welcome back, everydayers. Where we're getting started today, we're talking about it's NBA draft withdrawal season of sorts. You're seeing some of the best college players, some of the better college players, returning to some of the power conference teams, finding new transfer homes. And I wonder, where does that leave UCLA? A team that is ranked and was ranked a couple of days ago in John Rothstein's top 45, power 45, as high as number 4 in the country. And then you've got other sources like, say, Joe Lunardi in bracketology that has UCLA as a 4 seed in the West Regional. I think Jeff Borzello of ESPN has the Bruins as the top 15 team. Are the Bruins a top team in the Big Ten? The answer is yes. Now there are very many good teams in the Big Ten. One of which is now, if you look at John Rothstein's top 45, you're going to have Purdue as the number 1, just ahead of a potential Houston. This is where Purdue comes in. They've got Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn, and then the big transfer coming in is Oscar Clough, a guy who could shoot the three, a big 6'10", 6'11", big man heading in from South Dakota State. And that's where, combined with a lot of the starters returning from their national championship appearance over a season ago, with what they had last year as the preseason number 1 in the Big Ten, a team that UCLA couldn't beat in West Lafayette, that is a team to beat and will contend in the Big Ten. And why is that? Because one of their biggest players returning or coming in is a big man that could stretch the floor, a big man at the center position, mixed in with, Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn, who the Bruins got eaten alive by when they played the Boilermakers. So it is a strong, strong club. Now, UCLA, who went from 4th in the rankings, dropping to 6th after Florida got some big-time talent, right? They got Xavier Lee from Princeton. They got Boogie Flan to transfer in. Then Michigan got boosted up because they had Yaxel Lendenberg. And who is that? One of the top players in the transfer portal. You have Merez Johnson. You have a Dymar coming in, of course, the former Bruin. So they've got a front court that is to die for, literally. And they brought in Elliot Cadeau. So that is a team that has brought in front court depth, front court starting talent that can come off the bench, and just like UCLA, arguably either upgraded or brought in somebody that is a pass-first true point guard in Elliot Cadeau from North Carolina that's expected to start right away after losing Donaldson from last year's team. They lost Danny Wolf, of course, and Vlad Golden. So they lose some talent, but they brought in a lot of talent, much of which coming in the front court and addressing their backcourt needs. So this is a Michigan team that maybe, in my mind, won't shoot it as well as they did a year ago when they could truly light it up with Golden, with Wolf, with Donaldson like he did against UCLA at Pauley Pavilion. But again, Michigan bringing the size and getting Lendenberg, who withdrew from the draft, is going back to Michigan, transferring over, I should say. That's a team that is now projected to be just ahead of UCLA and the second best team in the Big Ten, and could have still been even if Lendenberg didn't come through. But now they got a projected lineup where they have a small ball center, Merez Johnson from Illinois, or you could bring a Dymar off the bench playing in a similar role like he did at UCLA, funny enough, coming off the bench. I wonder how that will play out over at Michigan. And then you've got UCLA, who's floated between as high as 4th in this offseason without bringing any significant talent in the last 2 months. All right, since the portal opened in the middle of the NCAA tournament, UCLA went out there, got Donovan Dent, they got Xavier Booker, and we know that it will be Sky Clark, Daly, and Bilodeau mixing in the 2 through the 4. Can Booker, mixed in with Jamar Brown, Steven Jamerson, and the rest of the players either returning, coming off redshirt, or the other transfers or 2 coming in, UCLA has not brought in any talent lately. Okay, so we've known the majority of this UCLA roster for quite some time. Any significant addition has not happened in 2 months, which means they were very fun to talk about early in the portal season when the window was open, the tournament was still going on, And it's been quiet as of late. It's not like last year where they got 6 transfers and brought in a lot of talent and mixed in a late freshman signee in Trent Perry, a McDonald's All-American. That's not what's happening here. There's a lot of players exiting, and they keep getting guys back from talented spots or hopefully growing into new roles and finding new homes over at UCLA. So the big thing is, as I've continued to mention this offseason, it's going to come down to UCLA's front court. Because you look at Purdue, they got a front court piece. You look at the likes of Michigan, and they got 3 front court pieces, including stealing UCLA's most valuable piece via the portal, maybe some NIL mixed in with the deteriorating relationship with Mata to UCLA on both fronts. So Michigan's added 3 front court pieces to replace their 2 7-footers. You've got Purdue with a dominant backcourt, front court combination. And then there's UCLA, who could be projected as high as the top 5, which is amazing that they could be top 5, but still only 3rd in their preseason conference poll. While you mix up and say, what are the rest of the top 20 teams? Well, you got Oregon, Michigan State, and Illinois. And if UCLA, if you believe the Bruins are a top 20 team more than I say a top 5 team, then maybe they are closer to a Michigan State, to an Oregon, to Illinois. And you know what Oregon had? They had the announcement that Nate Biddle is returning. Although I'm not sure he was necessarily going to go to the NBA draft and be successful. He withdrew his name from the draft and will go back to the Oregon Ducks. And that's a guy who's another big man who we know his skill set, but he dominated the Bruins in matchup number 1 in Eugene. UCLA did a little bit of a better job in Pauley Pavilion in matchup number 2 against the Ducks, but that's still another big man with a dominant guard in Jackson Shelstad. Now, they don't have as many shooters. They don't have as many top-tier talented players. They lost TJ Bamba, Angel, Keyshawn Bartholomew, Supreme Cook. Oregon has lost a lot of talented guys, mostly at the guard positions 2 through 4. But again, they're getting a returning piece at the center spot. Again, a UCLA key area weakness. You bring in Michigan State, and at this point, you just believe Tom Izzo is going to put in a top-tier roster, and he's brought in his own transfers from FAU, Sanford, and Miami, but they did lose Jace Richardson, so they're going to rely a lot on Jeremy Fierce. And Michigan State last year couldn't shoot the ball. So I think UCLA might have an edge in what they've brought in, what they're retaining, versus what Michigan State has. And then there's Illinois, a fascinating team. You've got the likes of Visic. You have both of Visic's over at Illinois. You've got Andrei Stojakovic, who could fit in quite well. Kai Boswell, again, sitting over there with Illinois. A fascinating international sprinkled roster there. You've got big men, you've got shooters for a team that is expected to compete and can be very well one of the better teams in the Big Ten. I think UCLA is in a better light than Oregon and Michigan State, maybe at this point, although they do have to go to East Lansing this year. Illinois, especially with the Bruins playing them at home this year, would be a fascinating battle with what Illinois brought in, including the West Coast kid and Andrei Stojakovic. But Michigan and Purdue, you can clearly see what's being valued once again in college basketball, and that's the ability to have a big man. I know in March it comes down to guards. But remember, Auburn ran so much with their big man over the last couple of years. And Todd Pettiford going back to Auburn. You can almost list any big player, big name player, and he's found a new home in the last week, withdrawn from the NBA draft, and is probably going back to school to extend his college career in the NIL era in the year of many years of eligibility. Now, we don't know if any of those 5th or 6th year guys looking for an extra year will get any extra years to play. I don't think so, considering we're still waiting on the settlement. That's where the Bruins are at this stage of the offseason. 3rd best in the preseason in the Big Ten. And again, the glaring weakness is what's being focused upon as strengths, as the teams ahead of them and just behind them are either returning pieces, adding, or getting great news from NBA draft withdrawals. So that is why there's so much emphasis on, can the Bruins get a lot out of the front court, and what is Mick Cronin going to get out of Donovan Dents in last season of college basketball? Is he worth the $3 million? That's the whole question we can answer this offseason. Speaking of a big-time exit and what UCLA might get in the recruiting ranks, let's talk about it next. A key staffer is expected to leave. We'll talk about it next on Locked On UCLA. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, can't-miss moments, and whether it's a game-winning shot, a breakout player, think of Tyrese Halliburton with a triple-double, no turnovers. How do you even do that with the season on the line in the Eastern Conference Finals? I don't know, but it's never been a better time to get on the action than right now, because FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Maybe what you're going to do is try and see, hey, can the Knicks keep their season alive in Madison Square Garden? That's going to be an arena that will be bumping, going crazy. So maybe you choose the Knicks to go Game 5 and maybe the Pacers to go winning Game 6. Or maybe you're thinking this goes the full 7 and the Knicks force the next couple of games to go all the way to the end. That's why you want to check out the player props. Maybe you want to combine it all into a same-game parlay. And if you're a new customer, you're new to FanDuel, it's a perfect time to set up. Head over to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, cruising on here, second segment of the Locked On UCLA podcast. Zach with you guys. We're talking about the report from 24/7 Sports, Matt Zenitz, that UCLA losing the director of player personnel, key recruiting liaison, if you will, key staffer, because we can't just say recruiter, it's a whole new era in college football, college basketball, any sport, with the portal, NIL, recruiting high school athletes. And Stacey Ford was one of those original key pieces to Deshaun Foster's overhaul to Chip Kelly's lack of recruiting over the last few seasons prior to Deshaun Foster being hired. Stacey Ford is expected, according to Zenitz, to go to Oklahoma. That's what's disappointing for UCLA. They're losing Stacey Ford. He is expected to be hired by Oklahoma. If you look at Stacey Ford's social media, still says everything UCLA, has not posted anything in the last couple of days. But Ford was a director of recruiting at Washington State, as Matt Zenitz notes, and that he worked where? With Ben Arbuckle. And where did Ben Arbuckle work? He was at Washington State. And Arbuckle, OC at Oklahoma. Wonder if that leads to a connection there. If the SEC money was an opportunity, just a new place, new time, new way to go get the top tier recruits. And hey, you're going to Oklahoma, you're not going to miss on so much. And maybe you're done trying to get the circus of the top players from the SEC to UCLA. Maybe you're done with who knows. But that is a key staffer in Stacey Ford, director of player personnel, that is no longer going to be at UCLA as expected by Matt Zenitz. And this is a report that was posted on May 26th. So something that kind of slipped past on Memorial Day if you weren't truly paying attention, utilizing the extended weekend, maybe watching more of the spring sports heading into the Women's College World Series or the UCLA Regional Reveal. That's huge because the Bruins are in the midst of some key recruiting battles. You've got Micah Smith, who was somewhat predicted by Steve Wiltfong of On3 to go to UCLA. Does something like that swing? Or if the communication breaks down, I don't think that might be the case. But the Bruins are in some big recruiting battles because you're looking at a 6'3" quarterback in Oscar Rios in the class of 2026. By the end of June, he is deciding where he's going to go, and that could very well swing UCLA's future if Nico doesn't stay longer than a year. If Madden's not ready, you're going to want to have a quarterback who's as good as Rios is in their own backyard to go to UCLA if that's the case. Or you've got Wilder out of Serra in Gardena, who is a 4-star defensive lineman, can move all around the D-line, got an official visit to UCLA. When you're looking at player personnel, bringing all these things in, that's not a guy you want to lose to another school when it's a lot of West Coast recruiting. Wilder would be a huge get for a Cavalier in high school to turn him into a Bruin. All right. And then you mix in, as I mentioned, Champ Smith, so many others that UCLA is on, just like keeping their own recruits, right? It's not just bringing in the new guys in 2026, keeping this team together in 2025. It's the fact that you might have to re-recruit these guys, or if you put in all the effort to go get some of the top guys early in the 2026 recruiting cycle, like they got with the Pudla twins, to the higher rated recruits in UCLA's verbal commit list at the moment for this upcoming recruiting class, what happens when it comes to early signing day and an SEC power, say Oklahoma, with Stacey Ford having some of these relationships forged from his SoCal days, says, hey, we got a little bit of a bigger NIL budget. Come here. We have an opportunity. We've got a young up-and-coming OC for the next couple of years. Come block for our QB here. Come, do this, do that, whether it's John Mateer, whether it's some other young quarterback, maybe it's an offensive lineman of some sorts coming to Oklahoma, just for example. And that's where you hope that doesn't hurt UCLA if a kid flips based on a relationship or the lack of NIL opportunities. But for so far, the Bruins have done a good job, I think, flipping the narrative, turning what was an eyesore, high school recruiting, in a hotbed that is Southern California, and once again making themselves a presence in this local area. And if they can go get Champ Smith from Vero Beach in Florida, they've got a national brand. But I do think the expected loss of Stacey Ford from the report of Matt Zenitz at 24/7 Sports is huge. Now, it's not official yet, but at the moment, barring something changing, I think this is, a coaching industry, a recruiting industry. When the best GMs, the best guys get poached, they get brought on to new staffs, to the SECs, the highest paid bidders in the Big Ten. And that's how it's going to be at the moment. And as much as UCLA's made a lot of change for the better, some people are still realizing that there's a lot more to grow going much higher, unfortunately, for UCLA in this case. So Stacey Ford expected to go to Oklahoma, improve their staff, which would be, I think, a big blow for their UCLA's recruiting and director of player personnel. But until that, we'll see how that affects the class of 26, if it does at all, or if Deshaun Foster says, hey, this is the business, I understand, let's just keep these relationships, and I needed to start with something rather than nothing, because Chip Kelly left the cupboard dry, really dry, empty, nothing, not a single thing. We'll see what the Bruins can do in the future. Next, we are going to talk about an article written by one of our own here in the Locked On Network, and I have a bone to pick about the Big Ten stadiums list on the best experiences, the best stadiums. I got some beef with the Locked On Wolverines host. We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. So earlier today, before recording this pod and preparing for it, I was like, wait a minute. What is this list I stumbled upon? I thought I saw some UCLA fans kind of complaining about this list a little bit too. The ranking of the 18 Big Ten stadiums. Okay, and now one or two of which might be undergoing renovations. Obviously, there's different reasonings for different things. But you've got Isaiah Hull of Wolverines Wire, who hosts the Locked On Wolverines podcast on this network. And I thought it was fascinating to see where some of these places were ranked in the all Big Ten, the Big 18, quote-unquote, stadiums list. And I was like, okay, obviously, is this going to be based off the stadiums? Not fully. The stadiums rankings were based on atmosphere, architecture, history, and overall game day experience, okay? So obviously, UCLA is going to be dumped on and dunked on over and over, because if you throw experience in there, you can't just absolutely throw the Rose Bowl to the bed, because the Rose Bowl is the best. But what's funny is that you mix in the Big Ten, you're like, okay, where is this? You have Northwestern, who's ranked in last, while their stadium's undergoing a new renovation, an overhaul, if you will. They're playing in the Lakefront Practice Field Stadium mixed with Wrigley Field. So Northwestern in their regular home field is ranked last. Then you've got Rutgers and Maryland, who are tied for second to last, 16th, if you will, in this 18-team Big Ten. Now, in this list written by Isaiah of Locked On Wolverines, whatever it is, Spygate themselves, you've got UCLA ranked 15th. Okay, they're going to dunk on it. And of course, he writes in this rankings list, he last went to a UCLA game way back in 2008. Okay, against Oregon State. Of all the teams, UCLA playing Oregon State, because that was going to draw some big crowd. And of course, dunking on the tailgating, great. Oh, cool. And then it's like, wait a minute. What is college football inside this Rose Bowl stadium when a UCLA game's there? Obviously, there's an acknowledgement that the Rose Bowl game itself is spectacular. But come on. I mean, I know we have our own problems, but okay, everybody dunks on UCLA. That's old news. The fact that their atmosphere and stadium is worse than Purdue, Illinois, Michigan State, Minnesota, who's got a newer stadium, Indiana, all right, Indiana of all places, who just had their best football season ever. And I'm like, really? Like, really? Memorial Stadium with the Hoosiers? Are you serious now? I might have to get Jacob Gowen's opinion on that, because, man, that's crazy. Then you got Kinnick Stadium with the Iowa Hawkeyes, which is amongst the better experience. But then where I lost my mind is seeing the Coliseum ranked 8th. Like, there's no way the Coliseum is anywhere with USC right now, anywhere close to the top, near the middle of the list, let alone the top of this list. And the funny thing is you have Isaiah talking about the couple of places that he had not been in the Big Ten for stadiums-wise was USC. And if anybody's known, if you've been to the Coliseum, it is awful. Even though they have a bunch of overhauls when they had the NFL there for a hot minute, the tailgating is garbage. Everything's garbage. And of course, it's the UCLA guy saying, of course, USC is garbage. Obviously, they'll get more fans. Generally, that's just obvious. But it's funny that you write this list now and you're like, what are they doing for an 11 a.m. game at USC? They're not doing that. How is that atmosphere that is revered by so many that high in the Big Ten? Like, that is ridiculous that USC would be that high over UCLA. And it's like, oh, look at this. It's like, no. What are you talking about? You're talking about a USC atmosphere that doesn't exist, comparing to a 2008 UCLA Oregon State game in November that was a beatdown for a bad UCLA team that year. Like a bad UCLA team at the end of 2008 when, let's remember, wait a minute, you had some young quarterbacks. Of course, we were waiting a few years for Brett Hundley, and you're like, dude, like that was a Kevin Kraft year of all things, right? That was a bad football team. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, that's what you're basing your experience off of. That is absolutely ridiculous. What's even funnier on this ranking that Isaiah put was how bad that atmosphere was for UCLA, all right, in 2008 in that game versus Oregon State where UCLA had Kevin Kraft at quarterback, okay, for a UCLA team at that point that went 3-6. UCLA had Kevin Kraft at quarterback. Like, remember the Kevin Kraft days. That was brutal, all right? The beginning of the Rick Neuheisel era. Like, come on. Now, that game wasn't as bad going into the fourth quarter, even though the Bruins lost 34-6 against Oregon State from that game he's referencing. And now the Tarps, yes, are flat out embarrassing. But to have said you've never been to a USC game and you're saying the atmosphere is so much better than UCLA, and you just have not watched any college football in Southern California in the last couple of years and seen the atmosphere, which has been great at times for a UCLA-USC game. It's not been that far removed from one of the best atmospheres was the UCLA-LSU game, the UCLA-USC game in 2022, the year after. But yes, I can understand when it's 5 billion degrees and nobody wants to go for an 11 a.m. kickoff against Bowling Green. Cool. And I remember how many LSU fans were wilting in the heat and that atmosphere was dull. Having been to Baton Rouge, having been to Death Valley. So I'm just like, okay, this rankings list is a little ridiculous when you have USC that high. And you're like, okay, he hasn't been to Oregon, so Oregon's not top 2. He didn't put Michigan number 1 or Ohio State. But I mean, come on. Like, let's be real. UCLA getting dunked on and then USC in a similar line. You're like, what is this? What is this? Obviously, if you're going based off atmosphere, UCLA is going to be near the bottom of the list. But have USC that much further up in 2025 is just blows my mind. Just blows my mind. I could not disagree more with Isaiah. And maybe I'll bring it up on a future Big Ten squad. But it's crazy because that game he referenced, if he's correct or incorrect, had an attendance in 2008 of 83,000. Now UCLA is still trying to get there. They're still trying to get back there. But man, oh man, it was, I'm not arguing that UCLA has the best atmosphere in the Big Ten. But the fact that USC is that far up on that list is ridiculous. And I think just wild. Because there was a time, and still fairly recently was a time when the Rose Bowl was rocking. It's not that far removed. It's just embarrassing that it is where it is now. So we have to do better as UCLA supporters of returning it to its glory. But obviously we have to remember it's Los Angeles, and we're just not going to show up on a random day when it's 95 degrees in the middle of August sometimes to go support. That's just what happens. But we do need to change the narrative and make this a better place for UCLA to win football games in the Rose Bowl because it deserves more attendance and more fan support. But I mean, USC is not that much better. Like, come on, the Coliseum in a stadium's list that much higher than the Rose Bowl is an utter joke. Utter joke. It's a real joke. Sorry, Isaiah. I disagree with you mightily. All right. Next Locked On UCLA episodes, we're going to talk the Women's College World Series because the Bruins open up against Oregon in their first game in Oklahoma City. We'll recap that. We'll react to it as soon as I can after that game. I'll talk more basketball, more football. The UCLA Baseball Regional on Friday. We will lead into what's a key matchup for UCLA as they battle Fresno State in Game 1, a midday game against the Bulldogs. All that and more on future Locked On UCLA episodes. So hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.